Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today bringing you another Dragon Ball Super discussion. And this time I will be discussing Whis Theory from episode 58 of Dragon Ball Super. So for those of you who have not yet seen episode 58, I highly suggest you either watch that first so that you don't get this episode spoiled for you and so you can actually understand what we're talking about in this video itself. So, either way, I am joined in this video today with Geekdom.
Pleasure to be here, baby.
Yes, and we will be dissecting this outline that Herm from Konzenshu actually made for us to kind of...
Inside Dragon Ball Super.
Yes, for him to pretty much make it a lot easier for everyone to understand Whis Theory. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video. As you guys already know, I've done an alternate timeline theory before. I'll post a link in the description and in the outro so you guys can check it out to get our basis for everything. So let's get started, Mr. Geekum. So when we actually look at the actual outline itself, we have two timelines, timeline A and timeline B. And as you can see, the way Herm's organized it, in timeline A, Zamasu is pretty much, you know, making tea and complaining. Now, Geekdom, do you want to make a quick reference so people can understand exactly what Herm's meant by that?
Well, what Herm's is referring to is in Dragon Ball Super, the episode where Goku went to go visit Zamasu for the very first time, and he was already complaining about mortals then, which was in age 780. Now, a lot of the ages that Herm's is using here are verified from the series, and some of them are kind of just his like assumptions, so to speak, especially when we get to the later ages. But pretty much age 780 is the present time of Dragon Ball Super right now, and he's talking about Zamasu complaining about mortals, so that's what he's referring to.
Right. So as we can see from both timeline A and timeline B, they're pretty much identical in nature. However, we do have a little bit of a divergence when we go to timeline A for the second part, where we see Trunks comes from timeline B, tells Goku and company about Black. This results in Goku sparring with Zamasu, and this is pretty much a little loop that's pretty much going to deal with the future.
Yes, it's called the causality loop. Just to really explain what that is real quick, essentially it's a time loop. It's like in Terminator, for example, when the Terminator goes back in time to kill the mother of the enemy of the future, Sarah Connor, and what ends up happening is, because the Terminator went back in time and the Terminator was destroyed in Cyberdyne systems, that allowed them to find the microchip and the arm, which had them create another Terminator, or create the Terminator in the future. So it's like a time loop. It's like the events of the future were actually predicated by the time travel of the past. That's the theory that we're talking about here. That's what the causality loop actually is. But if you go to your local library, you can find out more about that.
Yes, and guys, to make this a little bit more related to Dragon Ball, you know, obviously with the whole Future Trunks thing, I talked about in my alternate timeline theory that there's also a causality loop too, because the events of Goku dying and having a heart virus and obviously leading to the negative future will literally every single time, even if you include the scenario where Cell kills Trunks, that would lead to an infinite loop of Trunks always going back in history to create an alternate timeline that fixed things. So either way, when we look at that from the contrast to timeline B, we see that Zamasu makes tea, complains, and somewhere else in the cosmos, Goku is continuing to be dead. So this is clearly telling us that the Zamasu of the future, more or less, is obviously in a scenario where Goku is dead in that future. So now, let's go back to timeline A, where we see Zamasu A now has a love-hate crush on Goku.
No, a hate crush. There's no love there. I have a few of those.
He definitely loves Black, though. But he has a hate crush on Goku. He asks Zuno about him and the Super Dragon Balls. And we see this kind of going out towards B now. We just see a scenario where Zamasu is just complaining about, you know, his hatred towards the Ningen. And he just continues to drink tea. Now, Geekdom, do you want to go a little bit more in depth about this diversion right here?
Well, I think what Herms is saying, and this is mostly Herms, not so much Whis, is that in the Future Trunks timeline, Zamasu hates mortals, no matter what. Like, no matter which way you slice it, Zamasu hates mortals. But in timeline A, his fight with Goku and the fact that Goku's literally hanging out with gods, like, you know, for fun, it seems, he's homeboys with them, kind of fueled his hatred even more. But I personally believe that there's more to it than this. I don't think that Zamasu B's hatred of mortals if this theory is true, is just stemmed from his hatred of mortals. I think that something else may have happened. So that's my guess here. But we're going to get to that later.
When we go to the next step, we see that Zamasu uses Super Dragon Balls to create Black, then warps another year into Timeline A's future. You want to go a little bit more in depth into that one?
It appears like Zamasu knew that he can use the time rings to skip a year, so he just basically made a wish, skipped a year, made another wish, and that's kind of what's going on here to create Black. The only thing is that, again, I personally feel, and it's going to take a few weeks, there's more to it than this. There has to be more to it. I don't believe he just created Black out of nothing. I think there's more to it than this. I honestly believe that they're kind of bait and switching us.
Right, but from what we're seeing so far, from what we're seeing from Timeline A, he's obviously creating Black from the present time Goku. He's not using that dead Goku, and obviously I've already explained in my super review that there's a lot of contradictions that we can explain briefly later on. So now Geekdom, we see that Zamasu A uses the Super Dragon Balls to become immortal, and then he and Black use the green time ring to warp into Timeline B. Why, we still don't know, but why don't you go into the green rings?
And based on the data that we have, and what Whis was saying is that Zamasu gives Black one of the time rings, and that's why Black has a time ring, earlier in the arc or whatever, and goes to Timeline B. And the reason why Herm says why we don't know is because it really doesn't make much sense as to why Zamasu and Black would attack the future timeline and not attack the present timeline, or Timeline B and not Timeline A. And that is an answer I believe we're going to get early October. I think it's going to be early October, the first weekend of October, we're going to get that episode. So, we don't know. We don't know. That's the problem.
Alright, so now when we go to the next one, we see there's now no Zamasu at all in Timeline A, no Kaioshin in Universe 10 at all, and nobody would really notice because nobody really cares about Universe 10.
Yeah, well, what Herms is referring to is, and this is going to end up leading to a plot hole. I assure you it will. If they have the Omniversal Tournament, the Omniversal Tournament essentially cannot happen without Universe 10, or so we believe, right? If during the years 783 to 795, if there's no Zamasu at all, when the Omni King goes to Universe 10 to go check on it, or whenever they go recruit the fighters, there ain't going to be no Kais. There ain't going to be no Hakaishin. There ain't going to be nothing. So it does kind of end up being somewhat of a plot hole. But this is not a plot hole that Toriyama necessarily, it's not his fault. This is the plot hole of time travel, okay, in all fiction. For example, Back to the Future Part 2, when Marty goes into the future, he can't do that. You can't go into the future and meet yourself in the future, because if you're outside of the time, if you are outside of your own time, you don't exist in the future because you went to the future. The minute you go to the future, you stop the time stream from happening. You stop yourself from meeting your wife, having your kids. So understand, folks, time travel stories never make any sense.
Right, and remember, Geekdom, Zamasu was actually demonstrating this with Gowasu before, when they pretty much fast forwarded like 1,000 years to analyze how the barbarian race was pretty much interacting. Well, the reason why I was bringing that up is because if you could see, if he's fast forwarding time, it's kind of like you could just go into the future and pretty much skip all of the events that are currently happening. So obviously it's kind of weird, because it's like, but those events haven't yet happened yet, but yet Zamasu can kind of just skip it. It's kind of interesting how they're kind of applying time travel, because we always saw Trunks going to the past, but now these guys are literally just skipping regular events and going to the future. So now we go to Timeline B, and we see that Zamasu is now in Timeline B. Maybe he goes and talks with Zamasu B, maybe not. It's not necessary for this theory. Either way, Zamasu A has Black go around wiping out planet's population to create the perfect mortal-free world. So we're seeing in Timeline B that now Zamasu, the Zamasu from Timeline A, is pretty much the same one, and he traveled towards Timeline B. Do you see any problems with this, Geekdom?
The only unanswered question is, why would he choose not only the future timeline, but Universe 7? Why didn't he attack other universes? Like, what's stopping him from doing this? You know what I mean? Why choose that time and place? That's the question.
Yeah, and especially the biggest question I have is why would you attack a world that was pretty much already mostly wiped out anyways and was in recovering from the big travesty that they went through with the androids? Like, it's like you're going to a world that really doesn't even have that many humans on it. That to me is kind of...
I mean, all I can think of it, they wanted to train.
Yeah, that could be true. So as we go back to timeline A, we see once again there's still no Zamasu on that end, and now we go back to timeline B. Black attacks Earth, spends next year wiping out Earthlings, picking on Trunks. Zamasu A is nowhere near in sight, presumably off carrying out another part of his nefarious plan. Zamasu B could still be making tea for Gowasu and complaining, as for all we know. So this is 100% confirming from what Terms is saying, that there are two Zamasus, and there have to be two Zamasus based off of the fact that even if you say it's the same Zamasu who's causing the problems, there have to be at least two Zamasus because there has to be a Zamasu of that timeline B. What he's doing, we don't know. Is he the one that's causing this havoc? We don't know for 100% certainty in fact. But it is interesting to state that Herms is isolating both. What do you think about this whole thing, Geekdom, of this Zamasu being future versus present? Which one do you lean towards?
Well, here's the thing, man. One of the possibilities is that Zamasu A went to the future, and this might be revealed soon if I'm right, contacted Zamasu B, told him everything about Goku, told him everything about the mortals, told him, because if they're both hating mortals and they meet each other, then they're going to be kindred spirits, just like how Black said that Zamasu is a kindred spirit. So again, we're seeing some interesting stuff here. So it could be possible that Zamasu B knows everything because Zamasu A already talked to him, and that the guy who they fought in the future, Goku and Trunks, might have actually been Zamasu B, and he just happens to know. That's the theory that Dino came up with recently.
See, that's actually a very interesting theory, Danny, but the only question I have, and obviously we don't have an answer to it yet, but why is it that if Zamasu had already done this future event, then why is it that we're seeing right now in the present that it's like Zamasu never acquired the rings or the Patara or anything? Like, he hasn't even done any of this stuff yet. And obviously they want to protect Gowasu because they fear something might happen.
I don't have an answer for that one, bro.
Exactly. That's the whole reason why I was saying it's hard to believe that this Zamasu could be the same one. But I do like what your theory about how he could have possibly have spoken to the future Zamasu and pretty much gave him the fill-in that, yeah, I'm another you that pretty much wanted to cause all this havoc. So when we go back to the other part of theory A, everyone's probably having a great time in timeline A because Zamasu's pretty much gone. And when we go back to timeline B, we see Trunks escapes to 780 in a timeline A and pretty much warns Goku and company of all of this stuff that's pretty much happening, and pretty much from what we saw in episode 57 of Dragon Ball Ssuper so far. So this has been a very interesting theory, and I like how Herms made this very organized. And even though Herms obviously doesn't have omniscient information about everything, he did his best to at least explain the unexplained things of this. What do you think?
This theory was made prior to them going back to Universe 10 like they did at the end of episode 58. So they're using this theory and applying it to prevent this theory from happening. So because they are aware of this happening, it's gonna not happen. See what I'm saying? Now that they know it's happening, it's not gonna happen. So, spoiler alert, we know from the next few episodes that something bad's gonna happen to Gowasu, and that Beerus is gonna step in and wipe out Zamasu. Again, I said spoiler alert, you've been warned. So if Beerus kills the present Zamasu, how does that affect this entirely? And that's what I'm saying, is that now that they know this, or they assume this, you know, it's like, it's not going to happen. They can stop it. If you know a bad event's going to happen in the future, you can stop it from happening.
If you really think about it, no matter what way you slice the bread, Gowasu has to die for this to continue. It cannot... The events of motion cannot continue unless Gowasu dies. It has to happen. It's part of the story. Would you agree with that?
If Zamasu kills Gowasu, I mean, what's stopping Whis from turning back time and bringing him back to life again? You know what I mean?
That's something we should also factor in. Whis himself can change time.
He can reverse time 3 minutes, so that we could always... Again, we're going to find out in a couple weeks anyways, but... I'm just saying that what Herms wrote here is just a good recap of what Whis said, but it's also one of those things where now that they're aware of it, it's not going to happen that way. So this is what I've been telling everybody, is that this puzzle has not been resolved yet, and I think it's going to take a few more weeks, but I think it's going to be something different. I think we are being baited into thinking something, but there's going to be more twists coming, which, I mean, if it turns out to all make sense, at least to a degree, it could be some of Toriyama's best writing in years.
Well, Geekdom, to close this out, I just want to end this with a gut theory. Gut theory, Geekdom. Do you think Black was based off of the present Goku or the future Goku's body?
That's a theory that he is future Goku's body. I think it's possible, yeah. I think it's possible. I can't say for sure, because I've had people say he might be a god of destruction. You know, I don't really know. I honestly don't know. I just think there's something more. There's something missing, and it might be something that doesn't make much sense, but there's still something missing because it's Goku's body and his techniques, but it's not his attitude at all. Like, it's not even at all his attitude.
Well, guys, I think that's been enough theorizing for today. Before I close this video out, I just wanted to give a big, shout out and thank you for Herms for creating this outline, because I definitely think this was a great way to make it a lot simpler for people to try and understand what Whis was talking about. Even though it's still unsolved, it was a great thing by Herms, and I'm gonna post the links so you guys can check out his Twitter in my description. In addition to this, check out my alternate timeline theory if you want to know a lot more about Dragon Ball time travels. It's my theory, so it's nothing official, but it's my way of interpreting things. And last but not least, please check out Geekdom 101, the big daddy of the Dragon Ball YouTubing community. He's provided a lot of great stuff for us, and he makes great videos. So with everything else said, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys, and Geekdom, take us out.
The hashtag of the day is #OutOfTime.